Okay, so the Moviegoer by Walker Percy is a 1961 novel. I went into this not knowing too much about Walker Percy. I guess this is an established kind of thing with me, is that when I go into a novel, I try not to. Part of it is laziness, and another part is I don't want to necessarily spoil the whole thing, and I want to go into it kind of raw and kind of a little bit ignorant, I guess, just to kind of a blank slate, I guess. But I do know that he comes from a kind of Southern Gothic tradition, and he has kind of a history in philosophy too. He comes from, which is an interesting mix, because normally I think of Southern Gothic as Flannery O'Connor or Carson McCullers, and the kind of William Faulkner kind of thing, maybe more Cormac McCarthy modern day. And I've heard people say that Walker Percy probably influenced McCarthy in a lot of ways, and I did definitely see that after having spent most of last year, or not most, but a good deal, trying to kind of go through slowly all of McCarthy's. Obviously I'm not there yet, nearly, but I still have Citrus sitting down there on my shelf. But yeah, I do know that he comes from the he comes from a established background with philosophy, and there's existentialist themes underpinning this whole thing of the everydayness, and which also fits kind of into phenomenology as well, and Heidegger and stuff, and talking about the Dasein, kind of the everyday, and the being, the act of being and living out this everyday, and you're thrust into dogs, that Doors song says, throwing a dog into Riders on the Storm, or not Riders on the Storm, but the whatever that one was, I can't remember, but it has the that kind of electric piano thing, waterfall kind of thing. But yeah, so it has all these themes kind of coming together, and another thing is the Dante's Divine Comedy and it also reminds me a bit of James Joyce, Ulysses, in a sense of it just playing, it's mostly just kind of one time period. I don't know, it's not a day, it's certainly not a day, but it's it's one kind of interim of this 30-year-old man named John Bickerson, but he goes by Binks Bowling, so Binks, yeah, Binx, and it took me forever to kind of get that name right. Binks Bowling. So he's a guy about my age, probably a little bit older than I am now, but yeah, he's really close to on the cusp of turning 30, and he finds not a lot of meaning in life. It starts kind of in media res at this moment when he's recalling his aunt, and his aunt, her name is, I kind of forget it, Smith Lee Bowling, I think. Yeah. I'm sorry, no, that's her mother. Emily Coutre, yeah, Nee Bowling. So yeah, she's the kind of aunt who kind of takes more of a motherly realm, whereas mother's kind of a little bit, sometimes a little bit kind of, she gets a lot more kind of maybe sage advice, sometimes, but a lot more kind of a stronger kind of authority on certain matters by her aunt Emily. So but yeah, so he's basically kind of looking through life. He's kind of gliding through life, watching movies. That's why it's called the Moviegoer. He's he daydreams a lot. He's kind of in a perpetual daydream of just kind of everything kind of goes back to movies. He's talking. It starts out, like I said, I didn't finish that thought, but it starts out with him. It has been a couple of months since I've read this. It's actually late, so if apologies if it's still coming back to me. I have to look at some notes here, but yeah, it starts off with him kind of musing on the time when he lost his brother, I think, and he's that was the time when he remembers his aunt came into his life kind of as a very more with more care and more concern, and but she was also kind of harsh to a degree, not abusive, but just very Southern lady, this is all New Orleans, and that's kind of where Walker Percy comes in as autobiographical kind of that's where he comes from. So hence the kind of Southern Gothic flair to that, and the kind of the dynamics of the Old South shows up a lot too, which is why that reminds me a lot of McCullers and O'Connor. You know, this kind of this want of a recrudescence of like holding on to the vestigial remnants of this Old South that people kind of hold up as like, this is like the time when everybody was so great, everybody was so noble, you know, like true gentlemen, Southern gentlemen and Southern belles, you know, like that's like the kind of dandy kind of mindset that a lot of people had. But yeah, these but now it's kind of fading away, and now it's like this you know, like that's where Faulkner kind of goes into the very kind of gritty of like, you know, of that kind of a dilemma too. But I don't think Percy actually focuses that much on that kind of the old era. He's more like the kind of going in on the very specificities, not quite the universal kind of overarching thing of the South. But you know, that is too. I mean, there's our existentialists, but he's coming in from the very particular and then looking at the universal through the particular, I guess, if that makes sense. I mean, these are obviously very, very vague phrases, but yeah, so he's going around and he's like aimless, and he works as a stockbroker, so he's like you know, he's kind of doing these kind of duties that are afford him the luxury to kind of seduce he has like talks about like receptionists that he has, and then he's kind of like very non-committal, unserious kind of relationships, which you know, he's like kind of even, you know, he's like reaching 30 and he's like kind of thinking about how which is why it kind of reminds me a lot, or that's why Albert Camus shows up as a obvious influence of like how Meursault, definitely Meursault too was more, probably Meursault was a little bit more of a realist than Binkspole, and I think Meursault was pursued these very unserious flings, and yeah, I didn't really invest a lot of like intimacy or like, you know, like in trust, and like, you know, really thinking about the overall, you know, like what's my life going to be. I'm just kind of going around and like to the point where like shooting an Arab is like, you know, it's like it's just because the sun was in his eye. He had no reason for anything. Like it's just, there's no, the absurd, yeah. So the absurd plays into the role very strongly in Bowling's life, where he's just kind of ambling around, not really meandering, not committing to any one thing, whether it's his work, where he's like, you could argue maybe that he found success as that, but he's also, it's a very kind of unthinking, very not really cerebral job, and it's also, there's not a lot of nobility, there's not a lot of like honor like anything that honor to it, but he does have a he did serve in the Korean War, I believe. Yeah, so he had experiences in the Korean War, and you know, obviously that had a lot less of like conflict versus kind of like the casualties of that war, I think, were like not so much so like over like with two fronts like in the World War II, but yeah, that it definitely was like, you know, he left him kind of a bit traumatized, you know, but he does, so there's some of those play into his personality and why he wants to kind of escape from that. So it's not like he's just a flat out kind of person, but he has, you know, he has a past where, you know, you can discern, but he's like, and it's giving a very intimate, almost first person narrator, although it's not in a first person narrator technically, but it's kind of giving a very kind of direct, like unambiguous kind of view into his, you know, all these different things, and he's like trying to push the past back. He's trying to kind of cling to these things and the comforts and the kind of the secure. There's not like, he's not big on security, but he finds security maybe in these. How am I trying to explain this? These movies and just kind of going to movies in the cinema back when there's projectors, and like there was, going to the cinema was more of a immersive physical experience where your sensory people, like there's, you know, like you're actually sitting there with the popcorn, you know, or whatever, and the soda, and like and this what is this, 50s? I guess it's contemporary, so I guess it is. Percy wasn't like making it, you know, at a specific kind of period novel in any sense, I don't think. I'm pretty sure it's set right around when he writes it, so he's like talking about in the early 60s, so he's talking about kind of these kind of what are the, you know, like these not John Wayne, but not kind of movie heroes, Jackie Gleason, I guess. These kind of guys that he kind of identifies with. Like he lives his life kind of vicariously through these movies, and he doesn't. It's what makes him feel at home. Like he's like kind of assuages all that stuff. He's like kind of, I'm just gonna stick with this stuff. And but yeah, but he's kind of going on a crisis because around Mardi Gras, he goes through New Orleans and he's seeing all the kind of parades and stuff that happen, which is, from my knowledge, I've only kind of ducked in there once, New Orleans for work around, like when I was in the early 20s, I think, and yeah, my understanding is that Mardi Gras, I wasn't there around that time. It was like a winter, I think. But yeah, but like Mardi Gras is a pretty big thing for New Orleans. So he was like going around there and like there's like people throwing tassels and parades, and he has kind of a I don't want to say midlife crisis because he's obviously not there yet, but he has a crisis of some sort, an existential one, as overplayed as that is. He's this cat. But yeah, it is a definite kind of changing, kind of impactful change of heart he has, and he feels like he has like all these newfound philosophical things, and he's like thinking about how he could have lived his life, and like he's like, I should have not really spent all this time in the movies, just kind of wasting my time and squandering it, just kind of ambling around circuitously, but I should have taken something seriously. And he's like thinks about his past, and there's a good amount of flashbacks in this, so he's like thinking about the time when he went to when his mother and his various peers and father kind of would say that he should have went to school for something more, I think it was like to do with like kind of like the sciences or something, to be more something with like kind of like the analytical kind of mindset that he but he is mistaken for someone. He says like, all this time people have mistaken me for somebody that's a lot more cerebral and like smarter than I am, simply because I don't like, I kind of like, I think before I speak, or I'm kind of reserved, I guess, his nature. That is why people have mistaken him to be like, oh, he has to have some kind of intellect going on, but it's like mostly he's like saying, no, it's nothing, or at least that's what he claims. But then he meets or rather he has already known his cousin, I think technically his cousin in some respect, Kate Cutre, and she is basically 5 years younger, so she's in her mid-20s, and she's like has been widowed very tragically. Her husband died when she was 19 in a very awful car accident, and she's like talks about how these moments when she's like in these states of like extreme anxiety, like she's like really kind of like she's like a foil to Binks, because there's like a love interest kind of vaguely going on, but it's like it never really comes to anything too much, because she's kind of contrasting in these her differences in her inclinations and where her heart lays at, where it's like she's more the only thing, where there's a quote that I really loved where she talks about how this is Kate talking. They think of any minute I'm going to commit suicide. Yeah, because she was on suicide watch, kind of, she's like, people have wrote her off as kind of just like that classic cliche of a moody widow that's like, gonna, she's gonna commit suicide any minute, but, and then she says, what a joke. The truth is, of course, is the exact opposite. Suicide is the only thing that keeps me alive. Whenever everything else fails, all I have to do is consider suicide, and in 2 seconds I'm as cheerful as a nitwit. But if I could not kill myself, then I could do with without new metal or murder mysteries, but not without suicide. So that's kind of her. It's like almost a galvanizing catalyst for some like moment, and that's an interesting kind of dynamic between Binks and Kate. Is that his thing is like a more mollifying, soporific kind of just kind of dreaming through life, not taking things seriously, which I made that point abundantly clear, but that is the kind of the center point of the novel, I think, that kind of hones it in, but yeah, so, and basically kind of the movie comes to a head, or the the novel comes to a head when his aunt really kind of hones in this notion that he's like, he's not a failure, he's not like an overt failure, but he's like not really taking things as soberly as he should, and there's some kind of shame, or there's some kind of definite disappointment, and like kind of she's kind of like impatient with his especially in the Old South when religion was like a big thing, and like this kind of very almost baptismal kind of Christianity of I don't know, it's just like a lot more kind of stern and austere. So she's like coming from that kind of tradition, and the fact that he doesn't really feel for it at all. Like he has no, he's so ambivalent towards all these different things, and it's like that kind of also makes him think like a little bit, where he's like he has these not only philosophical but kind of religious kind of crisis, because he's also thinking about how like all these people finding God or looking for God, and the only thing he's looking for is like a I don't know, like he has like a really, he said something really interesting there. I can't remember the quote, but he was saying something about all these people with religion, and he's like, he's trying his best to not overachieve. He's just like, I'm just trying to, I have my whole life. I'm not trying to find God just yet. I'm just trying to figure some very basic stuff out. And yeah, a part of that I could definitely identify with, but I think that's all I have for The Moviegoer by Walker Percy. I'm definitely going to be slowly working my way through his stuff as well. And yeah, thanks for watching.